Yes, neoclassical metal, my dear beloved. There's just something about the combination of good old heavy metal music and traditional classical harmony that has just always been absolute ear candy for me. And even though this style of music is maybe a little bit niche, I really do believe that there's so many valuable things that guitarists can learn from it. Especially if you're wanting to up your music theory game and just break out of that sort of, traditional heavy metal pentatonic box. So, seeing as I'm really like the only established YouTuber in this space who gives a shit about this genre basically, today I want to give you a comprehensive, exhaustive deep dive into the glorious, majestic world of neoclassical metal. Let's do this! Even though neoclassical metal is a very flashy style, it actually isn't that complex on a technical level. Not saying it's easy of course, but most of it is rather straightforward in the amount of techniques involved. Almost all of the neoclassical shred soloing comes down to two main techniques, sweeping and economy picking. Sweeping consists of playing adjacent strings with a single continuous motion of the pick, instead of alternating the motion for each note. This helps achieve a much more continuous, fluid sound. The other essential, iconic technique for this genre is economy picking, which you could think of as a hybrid between sweep picking and alternate picking. Like sweep picking, it allows for smooth, flowing motions across strings, but it's a bit more flexible. When notes change strings in the same direction, you sweep. When they change direction, you alternate. It seems like these techniques just came out naturally to the first neoclassical players, mainly as a result of trying to imitate the way in which a violin or a keyboard would play fast passages in more virtuosic pieces. And in reality, what makes this style recognizable isn't just the techniques alone. There's actually many different ways in which you can obtain a similar sound without using these techniques. Just look at Paul Gilbert, for example. If you'd like to learn more about all of the concepts talked about in today's video and unlock access to my entire archive of guitar exercises, masterclasses and song lessons, then click the link in the description down below and get started at Bradley Hall's Guitar School with a free 7-day free trial on me. An arpeggio is basically a chord played one note at a time instead of all at once. This means creating melodies using exclusively the notes of the chord you're playing over. In classical music, arpeggios are used all the time in piano and violin passages. Neoclassical metal borrows that same idea, but played with the speed and intensity of metal guitar. Sweep picking works best when the arpeggio pattern is fully ascending or descending, but there's actually many different ways to play them rather than just up and down. Arpeggios are used everywhere in this style, and many of its melodies rely on them for entire sections. Another hallmark of neoclassical metal is the use of fast, ascending and descending scale runs. While arpeggios outline the chords and give that classical flavour, scale runs let guitarists move between all the notes in a key, adding tension and melodic flow. This mix of arpeggios and scale runs constitutes a good amount of the shreddy melodies of this style. The other very common type of melody is the use of fast, continuous melodies built entirely from 8th or 16th notes. This idea comes straight from Baroque music, where composers use what's called a motor rhythm, a constant stream of notes that drive the music forward. These melodies can get a bit more creative, mixing both arpeggios and scale runs to create more intricate melodies. Riffing in this style is often reserved for the more conventional songs, but there's still plenty of examples. Riffs in this genre are pretty much just speed metal. They take this Baroque thing of the constant motor rhythm and use it on low repeated notes, with a lot of palm muting and snappy, short melodies in between. Of course, neoclassical metal isn't just all shredding. Slower, more singable melodies are often overlooked in this genre, but they are actually one of the most important parts of its sound. These melodies have a super recognisable sound and are an essential part of songwriting in this genre, since they're more memorable and help balance all the shenanigans with actual, singable and hooky parts. Most of them are actually built pretty similarly, so to understand this, let's break down the melody from Brothers by Yngwie and build it back up step by step. The first step and the key to these slower lyrical melodies is in the way they outline the harmony, the chords underneath. Just like in classical music, the key to building these melodies is in emphasizing the chord tones really clearly. This will create a solid initial structure for our melody, so logically the next step would be to connect them, looking for strong resolution and clear direction. So far, these past two steps are the base for most melodies in every other genre out there. What gives these melodies their signature flow is actually in the way they link these notes, which is nearly always through small stepwise intervals, seconds. The other signature trait of these melodies are classical-styled sequences. This means repeating small motifs of a couple notes up and down the scale. The first melody in Brothers is the simplest example of this. Interestingly enough, the melody that goes right after also uses this resource, but in a more creative way, varying the new motif around a bit more and using bigger leaps to connect them. Another common use for bigger leaps is in more arpeggio-based melodies. Lastly, they tend to use very expressive phrasing. This means adding a lot of articulations to make the melodies more lyrical, like a violin would, adding some of the typical Baroque ornaments and trills on top to give it a nice touch. Along with these ornaments, there's always some shreddy licks here and there to fill out the gaps and connect sections too. So to put this all to the test, let's analyse this melody from Far Beyond the Sun. Now that we've seen how these melodies are built, the next step is understanding how to actually use them in context. Even though you'll find your usual song structures like in any other genre, most of the instrumentals follow more unconventional structures. Just like in classical music, instead of having straightforward sections like verse and chorus, they'll use sections with a less clear function instead. This also means they rely more heavily on themes, which is essential in classical music. A simple melodic theme or riff is introduced, and later sections develop or vary that theme in different ways. This dynamic using of themes is not as strict as in classical music, so very often you'll find what's called a through-composed structure. This means each section flows and evolves into the next one without any strict repetition. More chaotic composers like Jason Becker love doing this. Harmony in neoclassical metal is one of the biggest ties back to classical music. Classical music uses very functional harmony, which means focusing more on the function of each chord and searching for a strong resolution to the tonic. Although this might seem complicated on paper, most neoclassical metal doesn't really bother using very intricate harmony, and instead relies on using the same couple of chord progressions and chord movements. Alternating between the 1 and the 5, tonic and dominant, in minor is by far the most common chord movement in this genre. The result of this is static harmony that relies entirely on resolving back to the 1, which allows for the good old harmonic minor scale to be used. While the 1-5 progression gives a strong, grounded sound, the tension doesn't really move much. To add contrast to this, you'll often find the circle of fifths chord progression. This has a very strong sense of direction and works great for creating melodic sequences. To contribute to that sense of direction and motion, it's common to use chord progressions with secondary dominants. This is an essential sound of neoclassical metal, since these create chromatic movements with a very strong pull and sense of resolution. Secondary dominants are just dominant chords that resolve to any chord of the scale that's not the 1. These are notated as the 5 of whatever chord they're resolved to, since the 5 chord is the only natural dominant chord of the major scale. Therefore, if we're in the key of A minor and you want to add a dominant chord resolving, let's say, to E major, the 5 chord, you need to find the 5 chord of E major, which is B7. Now we'd have the 5 of the 5 in A minor. This exact secondary dominant, the 5-5, is the most common in this style. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that the 1-5 progression allows for the harmonic minor scale to be used. This is because the 5 chord in the minor scale would naturally be minor, but when turned into a major, dominant chord for that strong resolution to the tonic, you're raising the minor 7th degree of the scale to a major 7th degree. This sound of the harmonic minor over alternating tonic and dominant chords are the essence of the dungeon, dragon-killing sound of the genre, so it's no surprise it's found everywhere in melodies and solos. This 1-5 chord movement isn't even necessary, and often you'll hear this scale used without any clear harmony underneath given by any other instrument. Of course, on par with the harmonic minor, the other iconic scale of neoclassical metal is Phrygian dominant. As the name suggests, this is just a major version of the Phrygian scale, which at the same time is just the 5th mode of the harmonic minor scale, so it's no surprise it's used as much as it is. This scale has a more exotic sound and needs to insist on its flat 2 to keep that Phrygian sound going. So most neoclassical metal draws directly from Baroque music. The fast runs, arpeggios, and counterpoint all have roots in composers like Bach and Vivaldi. But it's not entirely limited to this era. You can also find influences from the classical and romantic periods too. The more classical period influenced ones are often in major keys and usually create melodies based on the system of call and response, opposed to the melodies by sequences used in the Baroque sounding stuff. In the Romantic period stuff, harmony became a bit less functional and more chromatic, which helps create a more cinematic and majestic vibe. To finish, let's look at some of the most typical licks and melodic movements you'll hear in this style. These are the rest of the building blocks for almost every melody found in the genre. Pedal point licks are probably the most iconic, and they consist of a moving melody that keeps going back and forth between one same note and other moving notes. This creates a back and forth effect and gives a little bit of counterpoint. Melodic ostinatos take the idea of the pedal tone one step further, and instead of going back to one note, they consist of a repeating, short melodic pattern of at least 2 notes, giving a lot more movement and often shaping the harmony very clearly. One of the most recognisable Yngwie style licks is this 3-note per string sextuplet pattern. It's usually moved up and down through different positions, but it's a building block for tons of other neoclassical runs, giving that fluid, cascading sound. Diminished arpeggios are a signature sound of this style. Because of their symmetrical structure, they're very easy to play on guitar and perfect for fast, chaotic runs. Often used to transition between different parts or to build tension. These are typically used over the 5 chord in minor keys, since they use that raised 7th of harmonic minor. Now, although these are the most common, not every lick falls necessarily into one of these categories. There's plenty of melodies that use all of these resources to create their own original licks, while keeping that iconic neoclassical sound.